back to another brand new episode of Books with Not Just Breathe. 2021 hasn't been a great year for me so far, what with the lockdowns and the virus still surging, etc. But on one front, it has been very, very positive. And that is with the fact that I've read a number of books in this year already. I've already finished 12 books in the first 5 months of the year, and I'm mighty proud of myself. And I thought, why don't I do a video today to talk to you all about the 12 books that I've read so far, the ones that I really loved, the ones that were okay, and the ones that I wouldn't recommend for you to read. Just a bit of a disclaimer though before we start. I've been smitten by Asian literature this year. So 7 out of the 12 books that I'm going to talk about are Asian literature, which is Japanese and Korean. By the way, if you're new to my channel, then with Books with Not Just Breathe, I talk about everything that's related to books. I mean, what did you expect from a book nerd? So let's begin with the 12 books that I read in the first 5 months of 2021. So I'm going to read these books off my Goodreads list, and it would be in chronological order such that the very first book that I read, I would talk about it first. So the first one that I finished this year was Anxious People by Frederick Backman. I have recently done a video on 2 other books that I read from Frederick Backman, which is a man called Ove and my grandmother sends her regards and apologizes, which I'll link up there. Now, Anxious People is about a group of people, different people not related to each other really, and how they are dealing with their insecurities and anxieties, and then how it all comes together in a typical Frederick Backman style. I think with this book, Frederick Backman has gotten what I thought his lost touch, and I would say it's a good read. It has been a good read for me. It's a tad bit emotional though. It's not tears rolling down my eyes kind of emotional, but it is a bit emotional. So whilst I would say that it does get my 4 stars out of 5, but there is some caution that if you are not in a great mood and if you're feeling emotionally down, maybe you could leave this book for a later date. So it isn't a very upbeat book, but it is definitely a good read by Frederick Backman. So 4 upon 5 stars, and it gets my thumbs up as well. The second book that I want to talk about is, or in fact the second book that I read is Pachinko by Min-ji Lee. This is the first Korean book that I read in 2021, and it is about a girl called Sunya, a Korean girl called Sunya, who was born in the early 1900s, and then 3 generations after that, and 1 generation before her, which is her mother and father. It is actually a very nice story wherein you actually see the backdrop of the Korean and the Japanese war and how life in Korea and then for Koreans who migrated to Japan was. There is an underlying love story, there is an underlying story of family relationships, etc. So it is written pretty neatly, and the narration is very beautiful. It's a light read. It's a very no frills kind of book that I don't get to read a lot these days. So I would say that it's one of the perfect reads for a time like this when you're not able to go out a lot, especially if you are one of the travel freaks that I am. I think it gives a great insight into some other country that is so far away from me and that I cannot travel to. So I would say it's a thumbs up. It's again a 4 out of 5 in my opinion, but it does get a thumbs up from me. The third book is one of the best books I would say that I've read this year so far, and that is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a book about a blind French girl, obviously living in France, and a little orphan boy in Germany. It is again in the backdrop of the war, and it is just an amazingly vivid tale of these 2 different lives in France and Germany during the World War, and then how they kind of intertwine together towards the end. I mean, it's a visual treat, I would say. If a book can be a visual treat, then this book is a visual treat. I mean, in the sense that the description of everything is so vivid that at least for me, when I close my eyes, even now after so many months reading this book, I can clearly visualize the 6-story building in Brittany or Saint Malo where this little girl used to live, and it's a masterpiece of a book. So it definitely gets my thumbs up. It's a 5 on 5. Do yourself a favor, pick up a copy of this book and do read it, and let me know in the comment section how you liked it. And the fourth book on my list is another Korean literature called Kim Jiyong, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju. It's a very small book, but it really packs a punch. I don't know if I should be using the word feminism in terms of a book here that I'm reviewing, but essentially you can almost say that it's a pretty feminist book, in the sense that it talks about the subtle differences that are there in how men and women are treated, even in such developed countries as South Korea. It's an amazing book. I had mixed feelings when I was at the beginning of the book, but the moment I reached the end, there's a twist, and it just blew my mind away. It's a fantastic book to read. I would say that everybody of all genders should definitely read this book. This is also quite critically acclaimed in Korea. I mean, there was what I've read in the media is there was this divide between people. Some really liked the book and some said that it showed Korean men or Korean society in a very bad light or whatever, but I think it's true, in the sense the depiction that it shows is pretty true, and as I said, I really recommend reading this book. For me, this is a 5 on a 5. All right, the fifth book on my list might be a little bit of a surprise. It's The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I'm pretty sure I have pronounced the name incorrectly, but in any case, this book is a gem. The reason I said it might be a surprise is because this is typically a children's book. I think many of us would have read it when we were kids, or it's typically found in the children's section of the library or the bookstore. But let me tell you, this is such a great book for adults to read. And I think all adults should read this book. In fact, I'm doing a video very soon where I talk about all the children's books that adults must read right now. But until then, I would say this is a great book for you to pick up and read. This is about a little prince from another planet who goes around, who takes a little trip around these different planets and sees strange men, which he actually thinks strange, but when you read them, they're not strange. They're like normal people anyways for us. But so he goes around these planets and he meets these strange men and who have these strange wishes and strange desires. And then his monologue about how he feels about that, etc. But it just talks about these deep meanings in life, etc. And I think one should definitely read it. So this book gets, I mean, it's a children's book, I know, but I still would say it gets my 5 on 5. So with the sixth book on my list, we're actually entering morbid territory. This book is The Psychopath Test, A Journey Through the Madness Industry by Jon Ronson. Jon Ronson is a journalist, and in this book, he tries to go and interviews psychopaths from all around the world, and he goes after a sort of test which can actually determine whether you've got psychopathic traits or not. It's a pretty interesting book that ways. There are some great anecdotes, there are some great stories, but to be honest, I wouldn't say I found it very, very interesting. I mean, I'm going to say that it's an average read for me. I mean, of course, with every book that you read, you would know something or the other. But with this book, I will say it's probably a 2.5 or a 3 for me. Not a great read. Okay, so let's move on to the seventh book from my list. And that is an absolute laugh riot, I'm gonna say. And the book is Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roach. Mary Roach, if I'm not wrong, I think is also a journalist. And in this book, she goes about researching all the different ways in which a human dead body is used, of course, after death. It's such an amazingly hilarious book about something that is as morbid as death and also after death. It's just unbelievable. Her writing style is full of humor. In fact, I've done a full review of this book in my blog, and I'll put the link down below in the description. I would totally recommend this book. It's a 5 on 5 for me. It gets my thumbs up, and I'm definitely going to read all the other books that Mary Roach has written. Okay, so now we are entering pure Asian literature territory here. The 8th book on my list is Sputnik Sweetheart by Haruki Murakami. Now, Haruki Murakami is my all-time favorite author. If I start speaking about him, this video will probably be 2 hours long, so I cannot afford to do that. But Sputnik Sweetheart, and I've actually got a copy of that book here because I own all books by Haruki Murakami, and Sputnik Sweetheart is an absolute marvel of a book. In fact, I'm going to highly recommend this as my Murakami starter kit. So for those of you who haven't been initiated into the Murakami club yet, I would say you should start your Murakami read through Sputnik Sweetheart. It's an absolute classic Murakami where you've got the real ordinary people and then the world of magic, and they suddenly get intertwined, and then there is this boom magical realism that Murakami is so famous for. So yep, it's a short book. Again, I will do another video on all the Murakami books that I've read and my thoughts on Murakami. This is an absolute read from my end, so definitely a 5 on 5 if you want to get into magical realism and Murakami. The next one on my list is The Plotters by Kim Un-soo. This is a Korean book that has been translated into English. I actually got recommendation of this book from one of the YouTube videos that I've watched in Asian literature. This is about a group of plotters or contract killers who actually interestingly operate out of a library in Seoul. It's got a bit of a Quentin Tarantino touch. Many of the reviews actually talk about it, but I wouldn't say that it's a great book to read. I mean, it was an okayish book for me to read, so I'm going to give it an average rating. But definitely, if you're into Asian literature or if you're into Korean literature, there's no harm in picking this book up. It's not a bad book. It just did not tick all the boxes for me. The 10th book on my list is a Japanese bestseller. It's by Yoko Ogawa, who is a celebrated author in Japan. And this book is The Housekeeper and the Professor. I have a long list of TBRs from Yoko Ogawa that I will read eventually this year. But this book has been an absolute gem for me. This is about a professor who is in his late 70s and who, after an incident, has lost his memory. Now he can only remember the last 80 minutes or so. And this book talks about the relationship and the everyday life that the professor has with his, along with his housekeeper and the housekeeper's son. I did not know that such a simple story and such a simple narrative can touch your heart so much. And it's if I could rate it more than 5 on 5, then I would have, but right now I'm going to limit it to 5 on 5. It is just an amazing, mind-blowing, super emotional book, and well, not emotional in the sense that will leave you sad or anything. It's just emotional in the sense that it touches your heart in the right chords. So absolutely recommended. If you can, grab a copy of this book, hard copy or ebook, whatever works for you, but definitely read it, give it a read. Book number 11 is another Japanese book by Hiro Arikawa. I actually did not find a lot of other English books by this author, so if you know some great books by this author, definitely let me know. The book that I'm talking about is The Traveling Cat Chronicles. It's about a man and a street cat who actually becomes his pet, and then their journey together across Japan. This book is, again, a very simple story. I think that's pretty much the Japanese style. They either write about magical realism, or they talk about like real things and very simple very simple stories, etc., which kind of touch your heart. So this book is about, as I said, this man and his cat who travel through Japan, meet the man's friends, and how the story unfolds, and through flashbacks, etc. The cat also has multiple monologues in this book, and that's pretty humorous, I think. Well, and if you're a cat lover, then I would definitely recommend you to read the book. Again, a 5 on 5 from me, so you should definitely go ahead and read this book. Then the last one on my list, maybe I saved the best for the last, I don't know. But the last one on this book is again a Haruki Murakami, and this is his classic book, The Windup Chronicle. Well, if you are already initiated into the Haruki Murakami club, then I would say if you haven't read the Windup Bird Chronicle, you should absolutely read it. It is his masterpiece, and once I started reading it, I figured why it was his masterpiece. Uh, well, it's about a man, and well, his name ends up to be the Windup Bird, and then it's just strange things happen. It's difficult to even explain about this book in such a short video, so I will refrain from doing this. But as I said, this is, I mean, for me, if you're an ardent Murakami fan, then you need to pick this book up and read it. If you aren't a Murakami fan, I would say this isn't probably the book that you should pick up first. I would rather that, as I said, you should pick up the Sputnik Sweetheart first and start reading it, and then maybe if you start liking Murakami, then probably this is a book that you should pick up later on. But yeah, for all those Murakami fans out there, before I end this video, there's just one more bonus book, and that's a book that I'm reading right now. So that's book number 13, and surprise, that is another Murakami book. It's called After the Quake. I've read about 27 or 30% of this book so far, and by the looks of it, this looks to be different. This looks to be different stories, like short stories, sort of, all around the Kobe earthquake. To be honest, this isn't my best Murakami read so far. And if you're a Murakami fan, or if you are not a Murakami fan, maybe I will not recommend reading this book right now. But I'm going to hold my thoughts on it right now, because Murakami can be pretty unpredictable. I don't know what he's going to do towards the end of the book, but so far, the way the book is going, I am not very impressed with this book, and this is probably the only book by Murakami which I have not been impressed by so far. So with that, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you liked this video. This has been a rather longish video. I'll continue to talk about other books that I've read in 2021 as I progress with my TBR. But till then, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do like and share, and maybe subscribe to my video as well, so that you get updates of my weekly videos. And that's it, I believe, for now. I hope you stay safe and stay healthy. Until next week, I'll see you around. Bye for now.